Hey there, Python programmers, and welcome back to Brad's Code. Today we've got another video on for loops, a little bit more on advanced topics. As you see here, I have a little bit of code from our previous video on for loops. Again, just a list to iterate through. And we talked about simple for in loops. Again, our general basic, most often used. And if we run this, we see, hey, we totally get to iterate through. There are two built-in methods in Python that are very commonly used with a for loop, and I wanted to mention them as well. We're going to talk about each one individually and then how we apply it to a for loop. And the first one is the built-in function range, which is used to generate pretty much lists of integers, although it doesn't have to be a list. So we're going to start by printing just a range on its own. Range needs at least a single argument, but can have up to 3. And we'll talk about what those are in a second. Here I'm going to print a range, but I'm also going to print casting it to a list, because we're going to want to talk about the output for both of these for sure. And let's comment out our for loop. Don't need to be seeing that. Let's take a peek. So the first thing we see is just printing out range, and that is a range objects or instructions for what the range is going to do. Again, a range could be in a list, set, or tuple, so just printing out a range isn't enough for Python to know exactly what we want to do with it. That second print, when we cast it to a list right here, we see, hey, look at that. Python now knows, hey, I have the instructions to make a range, and I know what data type to make it in now. Again, we could have made it in a tuple or a set there. Cool. So a little bit more about range. If you give range a single value, that will be the ending value. And let's note that that ending value or that stop value is not going to be inclusive. We see here we provided it with just 5, so that's our stop value. But again, 5 is actually not included in that output. Really tricky part about ranges, similar to indexing, so we can at least remember that. As far as what the range can take, it can take a stop, basically an end, and a step value. If we only provide a single value, it's going to assume just the end. Sorry, this should be a start. If we provide 2 values, it's going to assume we've got a start and an end happening. And only if we give it all 3 values do we know, hey, we've got a start, an end, and a step. So let's do an example or 2 of those, and then we'll do it with a for loop. Again, I'm going to cast them to lists just so we can see the output. Let's do 0, 6. Comment out the other prints for now, so we just have the one we're focusing on. And let's check this out. What do we get? Cool. So again, we get a list of values. Our start value is 0. And again, we only go up to 5 because that end value is not inclusive. If we wanted a 6 there, we would have had to put in a 7. And now we see, hey, we get that 6. One other thing we could do, again, they don't have to be increasing. We could start with 10. Now, you do need to have this end value be 0 if you want the 1 included. But we can do a -1 step here. So let's check out this range. Boom, boom. Again, starts at 10, goes all the way down to 1, does not include 0. It just will never include our stop. So we can use range with a for loop to get an index. Sometimes we might need that index value. Again, here with our colors example, when we iterated through with our for in loop, we were just visiting each one. We wanted to get the value. What if we wanted to compare red to the value in front of it? Well, each iteration, we only get the value. We can index into another value with like an index +1, but only if we have access to it. So, for, and let's just call it index in range. Very common to do the length of an iterable here. So we could do a length of colors. Again, this is just going to ensure that we have an index for each value in colors. And now in here, let's print our index. And again, if we need a value here, we just use that index to literally index into the list. to obtain that value. Let's take a quick run and see what we've got. And hey, look at that. We're getting the index each time, and again, we use that index to get that value. Really, really cool. Again, the built-in range function, very helpful, very commonly used with our for loop. We do have one other great built-in we can also do, and that is called Enumerate. So like we did with our range, let's talk about Enumerate on its own first. E-N-U-M, Enumerate. Enumerate's going to be looking for an iterable, so we will provide colors to it. And then again, just like we did with range, let's print just invoking Enumerate, but we're also going to want to turn it probably to a list so we can see exactly what it's doing for us. Cool. So if we look, that enumerate function, first time, again, it just made an enumerate object, similar to our range. Sure, it's instructions on what to do with the enumerate, but we didn't say what we want the output to be. Again, could be a tuple, list, or set. So by casting it to a list, we actually get to see the values. And what it does is make tuples, providing basically an index and a value. So we totally now can use that list of tuples to do a for loop where we have access to both our index and our value. And that's kind of neat. So let's do for index, comma, let's call it color in enumerate, and we will pass in colors. And this ultimately allows us to kind of make a list of color choices, perhaps. So let's give this a clear and a run. And we see pretty cool again each time. Similar to what we were doing with range, we're getting both an index and a value, but now we do have access to each of those explicitly. One fun last thing we can do with enumerate, it does take an optional second argument of a starting value. So at the moment, our wonderful output here, well, that does look a whole lot like, something as programmers, we totally are cool with zero indexing, but people who don't know programming, they might be like, why is this list starting at 0? What's going on here? Again, we want it to be a nice readable list, so we can have it start with the value of 1 just by providing an additional argument of a start value to enumerate. So again, range and enumerate, two great built-in functions, really helpful with doing things with for loops. So definitely two functions we'll want to know about. Hope you enjoyed this video. And again, like the channel and the video if you enjoy it, and please subscribe as well. That's it for today. I'll see you again soon with Python